The trial of a man charged in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women is underway in Winnipeg. Jeremy Skibicki has admitted to those killings, but is pleading not criminally responsible. Cameron McIntosh explains.
This long-awaited trial has begun here at the Winnipeg Law Courts. Jeremy Skibicki faces 4 counts of first-degree murder, but is arguing he's not criminally responsible in the deaths of 4 Indigenous women. Rebecca Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unidentified woman given the name Mushkode Bishike Ikwe Iban, or Buffalo Woman, who police say wore this jacket. The court heard testimony from police and saw a video where Skibicki confessed to killing Contois and 3 other women. The Crown alleges Skibicki preyed on Indigenous women outside Winnipeg homeless shelters and took them back to his apartment where he sexually assaulted and killed them. An agreed statement of fact says DNA from Contois, Myron, and Harris were all found in bloodstains in Skibicki's apartment. Partial remains of Contois were found in a Winnipeg landfill. Police say the remains of Myron and Harris are in another Winnipeg area landfill. Amid intense pressure from the Indigenous community, the province and federal government are promising to search for those remains after the trial. Earlier this week, Skibicki's lawyer told the court that Skibicki admits to the killings, but that they'll argue he's not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder. The Crown, meanwhile, is arguing that Skibicki showed criminal intent, preying on the women over a span of months. The trial is expected to take 4 weeks and is being heard by a judge alone. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Now, my next guest thinks that the defense of not criminally responsible is going to be a difficult one to prove. Brandon Trask is an assistant professor of law at the University of Manitoba, and he joins us now from Winnipeg. I appreciate your time, Brandon.
Thank you. Good evening.
So we're early into this trial, obviously, but you've been paying attention to it, and I'm wondering, what do you make of it so far? Some of the details are already pretty disturbing on day one.
Yes, yeah, very graphic information coming out today. I expect we'll see more in that vein going forward. And that's because now the onus is on defense to have to prove NCR, and that's proven on a balance of probabilities. So here it's up to Mr. Skibicki's team to prove that he suffered from a mental disorder such that he was rendered incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of his acts, or of knowing that what he did was wrong, morally wrong. And that is, I think, quite an uphill battle for defense here, where you've got multiple killings over a relatively prolonged period of time. So the Crown will be using this evidence, this very graphic evidence, to try to show no, in fact, you know, there were indications here that this was planned out, that Mr. Skibicki was perhaps covering his tracks. And essentially trying to poke holes in this defense argument about incapacity.
I want to talk to you a little more about this defense argument, not criminally responsible, because we see it from time to time. It's not a common one, because I think it's almost always very difficult to prove. It is pretty rare that it actually is accepted, isn't it?
Yeah, it's relatively rare. I mean, where you do see it appear in some cases, there's actually, you know, quite often agreement from the Crown that yeah, actually there should be an NCR finding in the obvious cases. This one, I would say, is certainly a less obvious case. Again, because of the prolonged period here, this is not sort of a moment in time with one victim or, you know, multiple victims in a short span of time. You're dealing with 4 victims, again, across a pretty elongated period of time. That's going to be very difficult for the defense to prove on a balance of probabilities.
And this really is about what the defense has to prove, right? Because, I mean, to what end does the prosecution need to actually prove their case that he is criminally responsible?
Yeah, so the admission on Monday that Mr. Skibicki killed these 4 individuals, that was huge from the Crown's perspective. So at this stage, again, the Crown can largely poke holes in the defense argument, you know, including cross-examining experts that will be called by defense here. But the Crown can essentially build the case that, you know, there are all these indicators that the court should consider that essentially, from the Crown's perspective, negate the defense argument that there should be a finding of NCR here.
Brandon, from an outsider's perspective, hearing the news from that courtroom that this guilty plea had been entered, but not criminally, like admission of having done the killings, but not criminally responsible, and as the jury was ready to sit and listen to this trial, that all felt very dramatic. Have you seen something like that happen, and then the jury dismissed and it becomes judge alone?
I've not seen anything quite like this to this extent where, it was looking very much like it was going to be a judge and jury trial. There had been 2 rulings essentially maintaining that it would be a judge and jury trial. And then, essentially right before that was about to start, you had this shift that there's still the not guilty plea, but there was this admission that Mr. Skibicki killed the 4 individuals. And so I think going forward, it's very sensible, since the trial is now focused just on this relatively narrow issue of NCR. It's very sensible to have a judge alone trial going forward. Frankly, it would be very, very complex, very technical, and fraught with potential logistical challenges to try to have this running with a jury. So I think this makes a great deal of sense to have a judge alone going forward, and we also get the benefit of having reasons at the end of the day provided by a judge, whereas of course with the jury verdict we get no reasons. People can just speculate as to why the jury came up with that determination.
Brandon, you say it's going to be a hard one to prove, but should the judge find him not criminally responsible, then what comes next?
Yeah, so I think it's very important for Canadians to understand not criminally responsible doesn't mean that somebody's simply back out, returned to the community. So, even if the defense can establish that Mr. Skibicki was NCR in relation to all 4 of these killings, I would fully suspect that he would spend a very long period of time in a secure forensic hospital setting. That is essentially he would not be out in the community. If he is found NCR, I also expect that the Crown would pursue a high-risk NCR designation, high-risk NCR accused designation. That would essentially limit the powers of the review board. So basically, the only way Mr. Skibicki, in that eventuality, could get back out into the public on a full-time basis, that would only be through a court decision, not through a review board decision.
Brandon Trask, an assistant professor of law at the University of Manitoba, joining us from Winnipeg. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.